I understand why both Secretary Ross and Larry Kudlow are saying what they are, but it's a very different perspective from China, which is that Xi Jinping was absolutely not prepared to come and meet with President Trump until the deal was baked. 100%. Didn't want to negotiate. Didn't want the situation that Kim Jong-un had where they talked in generalities and there is or is not something to sign. Now, what we just heard on that clip was that if they meet at the G20, we're not going to have a deal for them to sign. That the hope is that they're going to move the ball during the meeting. The Chinese don't want that. And it actually implies to me, if you put that together with what we've seen from the Americans with putting Huawei on the restricted entity list over the last week, we're actually farther from a deal right now than we were a few weeks ago. Larry Kudlow's absolutely right. We were 90% there. The Chinese did walk it back. But since then, it's actually gotten more challenging.
So, Ian, despite that, do you think that the effect on the economy has been a little bit less than what people expected so far, whether we're talking U.S. economy or Chinese economy? I.e., does this matter as much as people had feared? Again, economists will say it's starting to play into the numbers. Certainly, I don't think you've seen massive impact on pricing in the United States. And I do think that Trump is going to be much more cautious before he goes after the remaining $325 billion that he's talked about putting additional tariffs on, because those are things that Americans will feel immediately in things they buy. That's clothing. That's children's toys, right? So I would be surprised if you came out of the G20 and Trump said, I'm going for those further tariffs. But again, I don't think we're actually very close to a breakthrough deal here. And we were actually much closer about a month ago.
So explain, Ian, how Huawei fits into all of this and why you think this company might not even survive.
It might not survive, right? And it's not because the Europeans don't want to do business with them. But as it stands right now, with Huawei on this restricted entity list from the Department of Commerce, that means that they are not going to be able to source the components that they need to actually roll out software upgrades, to roll out 5G. And that means that whether or not you are a partner of Huawei, you're not going to be able to do functional business with them going forward unless the Americans back away, unless Trump decides, actually, we're fine with them, we'll have a workaround. But Huawei so far has not shown any inclination to come to a deal, to compromise with the Americans, the way that ZTE, the China telecom firm, did over a year ago. And Trump so far has said, well, maybe if there's a deal, then I would also include Huawei as part of that. But again, we're not there yet. So as it stands right now, I mean, the Russians can say they want to do a 5G deal with the Chinese. Lots of other countries can. But you remember, when we pulled out of the Iranian nuclear deal, everyone complained. But they're all now not buying the oil they were from the Iranians. They're listening to the Americans because U.S. power through those sanctions actually speaks much more loudly.
Ian, you've written recently about a, quote, geopolitical recession. It's quite a sort of headline-grabbing phrase. But how bad is that? How is it going to manifest? I mean, you said with China that maybe we don't get a deal, but the next batch of tariffs is unlikely to be imposed. What about other regions, other partners? Are things about to get a lot worse?
Well, look, we know about economic recessions. They happen on average every 6 to 7 years since World War II. Geopolitical recessions don't happen as often. It's not often when a global order actually unwinds. But that is what's happening right now. And I think it plays out in the economy and in the markets in two ways, in principal ways. First is that tail risks become more likely. So whether it is the potential of trade confrontation between the U.S. and Europe or Japan or Mexico or Canada or China, whether it's, conflict with Iran, with North Korea, even though none of these things by themselves are very likely, they're much more likely than they would usually be because we don't have the institutional strength, the global leadership, or the certainty of the geopolitical order.